Good evening. Welcome to Hebron, Ir Avot, city of our fathers. It's about 1:20 in the morning. It's very quiet. You can hear across the city dogs barking, a few motorcycles trying to show off. But most of all, you hear the silence itself. Baruch Hashem, we've reached Torah 60 of Likutei Moharan, and it's a new level of Torah that we're going to enter tonight. Because Rabbi Nachman's Torah is a developmental structure. It's a Torah of the building of the kingship of Israel, the return of the house of David, the Sukkah David Nofelet, is being built through these Torahs. And for the people who spend their lives within this amazing Sefer, you see the evidence is happening all around us. The return of Israel to the land, the return of Israel to its own sovereignty, its own governance, and of course, the return to the Torah itself, the document that holds it all together. So we're blessed and we're privileged to be here and to be able to come to the city of Hebron in the middle of the night, driving through the lanes and the alleyways and the ancient shuk here. And, well, it's just an amazing thing when you think that for thousands of years, Jews have wanted to get here and they were not able. And now all we have to do is get in our car and, keep it between the lines. Torah 60 of Likutei Moharan begins with a piece of Zohar from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his students from about, give or take, 100 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. Of course, from the end of the Second Temple, the Jews were already thinking about the Third Temple and the return of Jewish sovereignty, of kingship, true kingship, God's kingship, through men. So, this Torah, which is going to speak, firstly, the Zohar is going to speak about the experience of the angels, what that's like. And then the Rebbe is going to go off in his very unique way to teach us about wealth and the power of wealth to expand the mind. Now, most spiritual people don't like to think about money too much. It gets in the way, right? But he tells us that there is a level of wealth that is necessary to achieve the deepest penetration of reality. And he explains to us that the hitbonenut, the contemplation of deeper, ever deeper levels of creation requires wealth. Well, why? Well, he explains that wealth, of course, is only a symbol of power. It's real power. Those dollar bills are powerful, especially when they have a few zeros on the end. But they're powerful because we have communal agreement that it's powerful. In other words, there's a haskama, there's consensus that money has power and everybody accepts it. And that's faith. So you see, people have mutual faith in money. Can you imagine if we had as much faith in, well, the higher things of life that we have, the same faith that we have in money? Be a different story altogether here, right? But the hitbonenut, the contemplation that arises from wealth, enables a person to peel off the outer layers, what he calls the pesolet, that which is discarded, just like the leaves of an onion. You're peeling back the onion to get to the heart. And so too, we're peeling back the layers of reality. The Zohar Hadash teaches that the whole creation is built like an onion. layer upon layer upon layer. And to be able to penetrate to the depth of creation, a person has to have extreme wealth, he says. And we're going to learn about that. Maybe not all of it tonight, because it's a long Torah. It's a real journey. And anybody who's been with us so far on this journey through Likutei Moharan knows, well, there's a lot of long journeys. But this one, and the Torah's in the 60s, we call them, right? Not the years of the 60s, when I was a kid. But no, the Torah of the 60s represents a new level in the contemplation and of Rabbi Nachman on reality, and his unique way of blending the Zohar, the Gemara, the Halacha, the Mishnah, the Chumash, every book of the Torah into one cohesive teaching. So we begin Ha'idra Rabbah Kadisha, which is Parshat Naso in the Zohar. He begins Patach Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon opened his discourse. Patach, of course, is also a vowel. It corresponds to the level of Chokhmah, wisdom, the Koach Ma, the ability to ask the right question. And the power to ask that question creates a vessel. The vessel brings the light. So he opens up his discourse, means he's opening up a channel to receive, because that's what Kabbalah is all about. Opening up an empty space in the mind and the heart that can receive something much greater. V'amar, and he said, Eit lasot l'Hashem, it's a time to do for God. Well, of course, the Zohar asks, Matai, Eit lasot l'Hashem. Well, when is the time to do for God? Well, when is the time not to do for God? It seems like a redundant question, especially in a religious context. That the people have left the keeping of the Torah. The people have put the spiritual matters of this world aside and been, flooded with the material world. What does it mean to give up the Torah? There's always people keeping these amazing mitzvot of Hashem. Torah de le'ela, the ihi mevatla. Well, we're talking about the upper Torah. We're talking about the Kabbalah itself, the Pnimiut, the inner secrets of the Torah, has been left off and neglected. And if we have not busied ourselves with the learning of the inner Torah. See, because learning Kabbalah is not simply just learning another discipline. It's about revealing the structure of the universe to the conscious mind. It's like the difference between knowing a person because they have this job and they have this name and they live in such a place and they wear such clothes. You know the outer layers of the person. Do you really know the person? Well, do you really know creation when you know biology, science, chemistry, etc., etc.? Well, without knowing the inner structure, what do we really know? And that is the Kabbalah. And that's called a tikkun, a repair. But it's not so much a repair like something was broken, which of course in the beginning of creation was broken and had to be fixed. But rather it's the bringing new channels of light to extend outward into the world, and that means into the minds of human beings. Ulatik Yomin Itmar, and about the Ancient of Days, which is a high level in consciousness that corresponds to the sphere of Keter and the Partsuf of Keter, which is the crown. But in the crown there are many levels. One of them is called the Ancient of Days. And it's written about that level, Ashrecha Yisrael mi kamocha. Fortunate and happy is Israel. Who is like you, Israel? Ukati, but it's written elsewhere, mi kamocha belim Hashem. We say in Az Yashir, and who is like God? Amongst the Elim are upper angels. Who is like God amongst the upper angels? Well, nobody. So you see, but the Gezer Shava, that is the connection between the word mi kamocha is repeated in both verses. So we understand that there's a clear connection because of that repetition of the phrase. And so he called to his son Rabbi Elazar. Now Rabbi Elazar was a tremendous Kabbalist on his own, and you see that throughout history, God always pairs these great figures in Torah learning in couples, because there's always a giver and a receiver. There's someone who explains and someone who understands, and that way the transmission is always kept alive. So he called to his son, Rabbi Eliezer. Otve Kameh, Rabbi Eliezer was sitting before him. Rabbi Abba Misitra Acharon, Rabbi Abba, the scribe who wrote down the Torahs, he sat behind Rabbi Shimon in the Idra. And the Idra Rabbah means the great gathering. And he said, Anan Klala Bekola, we are the inclusion of all inclusions. We are the collection of the tamsit, the perfect extraction of the general principle, the three of us. Why? Because we have the speaker, we have the listener, and we have the one who writes it down. So that three-way partnership, if you will, is part of how Torah is brought down. Anan Klala Dekola, we are the general of the general. Ad Kan Itakinu Kaimin. Until now we're going to do some repairs that are going to last. See, the Zohar would be nothing if it wasn't written down and given over to others for thousands of years. So that's what makes it last, is our reception of it and giving it over. And that is the repair itself, which happens through human beings. Ishtiku, and they were quiet. Shamu kala, they heard a voice. Arkuvatan da lada nakshan, and they heard wings striking each other. Wings. Makala, what voice did they hear? What sound did they hear? Kala, the knufia, ila'a, the mitkanfe. They heard a collection of angels from above, and their wings were striking each other. And that's the end of this piece of Zohar. What's going on? Why does it end there? Why doesn't it keep going? Well, we're going to continue this Torah in our daily classes on Patreon and on Facebook. And I'm sure a few of those will migrate over to YouTube and to my website, etc., etc. But really, where it's taking us is to understand that when a human being, especially a holy human being, reveals Torah, they want to know about it up there. And angels will come down here to listen, because the angel is the channel between us and God. And that channel is made of living desire. And part of that desire is to hear. Just like when you hear somebody talking, you want to hear what they have to say. Well, the angels heard Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Abba learning Torah together, and they wanted to hear what they had to say. So that means it must be pretty important. But that's where Rabbi Nachman ends the introduction. And now we're going to begin the first sentence of the first paragraph. Da, sheyesh shvilei haTorah. There are pathways of Torah. That it's not all one big highway. Sheyesh behem itburanut gadol meod. And these pathways have tremendous levels of contemplation. She'ef shar lavo litbonut. So it's impossible to come to that level of contemplation. Ki'im al yedei ashirut. Only through wealth. There is a certain level where wealth is necessary to achieve a higher awareness of God, of the creation, and of the human race, and of course the Jewish people. The Jewish people seem to have something to do with wealth, if you look around. Well, we even learn this in the simple interpretations of Torah. In ein kemach ein Torah, it says in Pirkei Avot, that if there's no wheat, if there's nothing to eat, people are not going to sit down to learn. So there has to be kemach, which is a metaphor, of course, for money, for people to learn Torah. And every person needs an income, a livelihood, in order to be able to carry on the rest of the work of this world. So too, for this great interpretation, shehu gadol me'od, which is very great, a person needs great wealth. So does that mean I cannot contemplate the depth of the Torah without getting wealth? No. We have to learn, and we have to go as far as our mind will take us safely and in a healthy manner. But we have to also understand that there are levels, and there are levels that we don't know about, and that there are conditions to reach those levels. And if Hashem chooses that we are people that transmit that level of Torah, we have to achieve the contemplation of that level before you can transmit it. And before you can transmit such Torah, well, there has to be a little bit of wealth involved. So we're going to continue this, as I said, on our daily classes. It's going to go on for quite a while. But it's been good to be here with you tonight in Har Hebron, the mount of the city of Hebron. The fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saw Rivka, Leah, and the Midrash Yalkut Shimoni, I believe, says that Rachel Imein was also here. She's just down the road in her apartment, in Beit Lechem. But we understand that the souls of these people are not bound by time and space, and for us, it's a half hour, maybe 40-minute ride, but for them, it's maybe 4 seconds, maybe less. So we'll be in touch, and we'll look forward to being with you again. God bless you all, and have a great Shabbat.